Welcome everybody to the space. Just to mention that what we're doing today is trying to give information about what we do as court watches. And we've noticed that court watching, and we declare court watching to be a movement, a very important part of a way to change. And it's just when people go into the courtrooms, observe and document what they're seeing, and aggregate that information. There's a number of us doing this work already across the nation, and we wanted to come together. A few of us wanted to come together today, together to give you that information in case you're interested in doing this work yourself or are already associated with a court watch and just wanted to, band along with us, or if you're doing court watching yourself individually. What we're going to do today is just move through a few of us as panelists and tell you about the work we're doing in our particular space and jurisdictions. And we're going to hear from Dr. Carmen in PG County, Reverend Anderson in New Orleans with Preach, and then we're going to circle back to what we're doing here with the Abolitionist Law Center in Allegheny County. I'm really excited to welcome you all. Again, if you could just put your name into the chat. We will be recording this session for the purpose of being able to view it again later on and posting it onto our YouTube channel. With that, you'll have to give your permission to stay. But yeah, let's get started.
Awesome. Thank you, Autumn. I am going to share this video here that features one of our panelists.
There are 4 screens in front of me. In 2, lawyers dressed in suits. In the 3rd, a judge in a robe. Then, a person in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed behind his back. I'm watching a bail hearing. Within 2 days of someone's arrest, they are brought before a judge like this one, who will decide whether they'll be released or incarcerated in jail while their case proceeds. These decisions can mean life or death, and they are made within minutes, with little information. All over the country, thousands of people go through these hearings each day, as if in a national assembly line of injustice. But in a growing number of places, people are beginning to hold actors accountable by showing up in court and documenting what they see. We are here, and we are watching.
Injustice happens in empty courtrooms.
Her first day court watching, Carmen was nervous. The trauma of her own incarceration had stripped her of her voice. She was here to take it back and be the ally she never had.
Honestly, I knew I had to be a court watcher because words that are spoken are only in the air. Words that are recorded remain for all to see.
Carmen sat in court for 6 hours that day, watching and writing, witnessing everyday injustices, large and small, all consequential. This principle of courts open to the public was inscribed in the Constitution by the nation's founders, who themselves suffered injustice behind closed doors during British rule. But the demands of modern life and the fast-paced legal jargon used in the courtroom means the public can't truly access what happens in court. There's no check on unseen injustice. Carmen wanted to change that. Through Life After Release, she was given the freedom to build up Courtwatch PG. Along with other court-watching groups across the country, it seeks to train a legion of volunteers to attend hearings and learn the language and process of court so that they can take notes, amplify the injustices they witness, and hold power accountable. Anyone, everyone could be trained to court watch, even if they knew nothing about the law. When the pandemic hit, the stakes got higher. Even one night in an overcrowded jail could be a death sentence. But in some places, court could now be attended virtually, making it more accessible. Ordinary people from all across the country started volunteering with Courtwatch PG. Most had never stepped foot in a courtroom. Carmen explained to them that bond hearings could be a fork in the road, determining not only one person's future, but that of generations that followed. She taught them what to look and listen for in court, and how they could get that information to decision makers and the public. And as they worked, they noticed the ways the system began responding. Prosecutors and judges became aware of their presence. Their accountability letters changed behaviors in the courtroom. Across the country, court watchers are realizing their power.
I court watch because the system will not regulate itself without observers to hold it accountable.
I've seen judges make jokes at the expense of the people who stand before them.
With transparency comes accountability. With accountability comes justice.
I witnessed judges berate people when showing clear signs of mental illness.
There should be court watching in every city and county across the nation.
Court watching feels like taking care of each other.
This could happen to any of us, any of you.
All of us need to be participating.
Justice is possible when we hold power accountable. Court Watch.
Awesome. And without further ado, I will head to our first panelist, Dr. Carmen Johnson, who was just featured in that wonderful video, coming from Prince George's County. Carmen?
Thank you for having me today. And we did this last year and it was amazing. And I know that it's going to be amazing today. And I'm just so honored to be in all of y'all presence, you know, and of course, you all know we've been meeting since the end of 2021 as a national collective. But anyway, what brought me to this work was our executive director of Life After Release, Ms. Kiana Johnson. And when she approached me about becoming a court watcher, I had no idea what she was talking about. And so she kept asking me to be a part of this. And, you know, several times I said no, because I was still affected from my experience with the injustice system, and also with, you know, being on injustice sabbatical at a federal prison camp for a little over 3 years. However, when she kept coming to me, I started understanding that court watching was very important, because when I went to trial, number one, I did not understand what was going on. I did not know what was happening. All I knew was the fact that I was innocent. And all I knew is that for 20 something years back then, I was a humanitarian, and that this situation was going to pan itself out, not knowing how the system actually works. And, you know, whether you are innocent or guilty, this system is just absolutely unjust. And, you know, after they arrested me immediately at trial, I didn't get the benevolence to handle my affairs. I was suffering from PTSD. I was suffering from depression. It was just a disaster. And I put all my trust in the attorney, without understanding that I needed to know the law myself. But I never had a reason to. My parents did not have a reason to teach us about law or anything like that. But, you know, in 2024, all parents, especially parents of Black and Brown children, they should be teaching them not only about their spirituality and helping them with their school homework, but they should also be teaching them about law. So after I agreed to be a court watcher, Kiana made me the director of Court Watch Judicial Accountability. And by that time, I had sat in over about 5,700 bond hearings. And I could not believe what I was seeing. And it took me back to when I went to trial, and I thought I was the only one that this happened to. And then after sitting in 5,700 bond hearings, I started to understand that this is a regular practice of what our justice system looked like. And it had already broke my heart because of what I went through, but it really broke my heart when I saw that so many other people was going through what I went through. And then after we, got Court Watch in Prince George's County up and really going solidly, Kiana had suggested that I start contacting other Court Watch orgs around the country. And so under her guidance, that's exactly what I did, not knowing that we was going to develop the most beautiful relationships and that I cherish to this day. And since then, we meet once a month, and we started the end of 2021. We meet once a month, and we talk about the different issues that we have that's going on in the courtrooms that we watch or going on in our community that affects the courtrooms. And so now we are putting together what you call a National Court Watch news podcast, because what we realize is that when we meet once a month, we never have enough time, because each of us are talking about what's going on in our community and what do we do. We're trying to brainstorm and things of that nature. So I was like, maybe we should do, because, I have experience in a podcast, maybe we should do a weekly podcast. And so now what we're going to do is every week, Court Watch org is going to come on the podcast and talk about what's going on in their courtrooms, what's going on in their community, and what they want the world to know. And that's number one. And number two, we want to be able to gain more volunteers to be able to volunteer with each of our orgs. And then the biggest thing, we also want to motivate new people that want to create new court watches in their communities. And that's pretty much about it. Not to mention, I wrote a book about our injustice system. It's called The Pretense of Justice. It came out in 2022. It's selling over in the UK. And, we've even, received emails from the UK in terms of us helping them help them start a court watch in their area. And so I'm very pleased with my book. I'm also very pleased with the work that Court Watch PG does. I'm pleased with the National Court Watch Hub that we've created. And I am very pleased and honored with all the relationships that we have built. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Carmen. That's a lot you've got going on, and I'm personally excited to tune into that podcast when the time comes. All right. Next up, we have Reverend Anderson from the East Baton Rouge Parish Prison Reform Coalition. Reverend Anderson, please introduce yourself. Ooh, you're muted. There you go.
I'm so sorry. Good afternoon, everybody. I am again Reverend Alexis Anderson. I am in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and we are having weather here we're not used to. So the rest of you will have sympathy for us. And it's part of the reason why I'm wearing a coat. So forgive me, because most of our buildings haven't figured out how to turn on the heat yet. So let me share that on December the 20th in 2018, we took a group down to New Orleans to train under Court Watch NOLA. And from that amazing opportunity, we have just seen so much change. And so I want to share just a little bit about what our program is. And I also want to encourage everybody that whether or not you know anything about courts or court watching or legal issues, or if you think you don't have anything, most people are more justice impacted than they ever thought they were anyway. One of the things that our opportunity shares with people is what you can do with the information that you have. And so I'm going to ask if we can go to the first slide. And I kind of want to walk everybody through. We are calling this our Weekend of Justice. And so we actually did 3 events, and this is actually the third of those. And so I wanted to share just a little bit because we cover what's called first appearance. That's the first time people go before the court after they have been arrested. And just for a record, when we first started, and we're in a district court, that we used to go into a room so small that barely 3 people could fit into it. The judges decided to have these hearings whenever they wanted to. They were most certainly not accessible to the public. And we were just fortunate because we actually had a judge in that particular court who thought the public had a right to know, but that wasn't uniform. And so we'd have our volunteers literally having to sit in a little space in the reception room for hours because the judges could decide whenever they wanted to have first appearance, when they didn't want to have it, etc. But from that auspicious beginning, we covered 240 sessions of court in 2023. And among the things that happen because we're in court so frequently, that little room, which is known as the bail bond office, didn't have any information for families. So we had people who were bringing title to their homes, all sorts of things, who had no information and no guidance. That same room, which had nothing in it, no information, now literally has a poster that we created that explains to families how bail works. It has information on our program, on how to find a public defender, on our Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Resource Center, because a huge number of grandparents raising grandchildren are doing it because of justice impacted issues. Among the things that were amazing for our time in court was that we became a witness to history because we were in the courtroom. And so some of you may know the name Archie Williams. He was the gentleman who was a finalist on America's Got Talent. His case was in East Baton Rouge Parish. We were literally in the courtroom at the time he got his exoneration. And in the pictures, what you'll see is one of our court watchers, but also with the necklace on was a commissioner who was responsible for reopening that case so that he could get his exoneration. Also, one of the preeminent voices in criminal justice legal defense is Dr. Angela Bell, well-known, world-renowned for a lot of her work. And so we were able to be there with her for the amazing, the late Albert Woodfox, who is, nobody should have the legacy Mr. Woodfox had, and yet he was probably one of the kindest, gentlest human beings on the face of the earth. He literally was in solitary confinement for longer than any human being in history. Again, out of Baton Rouge. And if we could go to the next slide, please. And so in our program, one of the things we do is obviously we get a copy of the docket, we go to court. Now court is always at 1 p.m. and it is always in an open courtroom. And information is provided to the general public so that they know where the courtroom is, they know what time it's supposed to be, they know who the judge is, and the general public can get a copy of the docket. That was directly because of the program that we had. Also, one of the things that we have been able to do is we have been able to find these areas where the court is simply not using all the tools at its disposal. And so we had two particular situations. 1/3 to 1/2 of our dockets, quite frankly, are domestic violence. And so we spent 2 years in a task force co-convened with the court to try to make sure that we were treating domestic violence survivors as well as people accused of domestic violence in a fair and equitable manner. We also are launching, as of February the 15th, a veteran specialty court. I myself am an Air Force veteran, so this is a very important and special population to me. We organized a community town hall to bring the veteran support community together to make sure that this court would be tied to our community. And so if we can go to the next slide, please. And so if you're a court changer, what does that take? Well, one, we had meetings, we still have meetings, we're in the court every single day, but it is understanding three things. And these are probably the most important things everybody has to understand. First and foremost, that is our house. Courtrooms are our house. They are public buildings. The public has a right to be there. And oftentimes, as you'll hear from some of the other programs, you sometimes have to fight to force that issue. And with every judge, you usually have to come back and remind them the public has a right to be there. The second thing is that in most of our courts, and particularly in criminal courts, it is the low and no wealth community that is targeted and brought in. One of the really important things that I know I have learned through this program, and I encourage everybody else, is to recognize an affidavit of probable cause is somebody's opinion. It is not necessarily a factual document. And one of the gifts of, as you watch courts and you record the information, and of course, one of the things we record, obviously, is what the charges are. We also record the fact that whether there is a public defender in the courtroom, whether there is a district attorney in the courtroom, and are there players, which in our case is happening right now, we're very concerned about it, are there players in places that shouldn't be there? Because most people do not get assigned counsel until they are at the first appearance stage. But many people don't get them until they're at arraignment, which can be several months later. So people can languish in jail without counsel. We also record for our system solitary confinement. How many people are in solitary confinement? There are a number of things that we think are critically important. One of those is what we call bond attachments. And a lot of people don't even know what that is. If you've never been involved in the criminal justice system, you might not know. And that is things like drug testing. Every single drug test has a cost to it. Electronic monitoring, house arrest, having to go through these classes. One of our biggest concerns has been that people get all of these things piled onto them at the pre-trial level. And so, A, they have to come up with money they didn't have, but B, these things are done as if they've already been convicted. And so that is a really, really challenging situation. And we always like to remind people that almost all bond attachments have a cost to them. And now we have, not all of them, but some of our judges will literally tell people there's a cost to it. We are still working to actually documentation of all the costs related to locking people up pre-trial. But those were direct results from us being in the court. And I think we have one last slide, if we can go to that one. So I wanted to very quickly show you what some outcomes of our court watch was. So one of them was we started seeing a trend that is still very disturbing, which is we have something in Louisiana called Raise the Age. It took a long time and a lot of community partners worked to try to keep children in the juvenile system. And it took forever to even get them to implement that 17-year-olds were children. Well, the pushback has been immediate. And one of the trends we've seen watching Court Watch is that the gift that children in the juvenile system get, depending on their charges, is that they will move be moved to an adult jail and an adult system on their 18th birthday. And one of the outcomes of being in court is we can partner with our juvenile partners to alert the community. If you notice, we have Vital, which is the super tax day. And one of the things that we learned through court watching is that there is literally something called bond season. And that is when people get their tax refunds. And unfortunately, they didn't have money to bond a loved one out, and they use that money for that. We got with our United Way, and now we do classes and workshops on what bond is, what bail funds are. All of that is part of Super Tax Day. That is one of the outcomes directly of our court watch. We saw so many families and so many people get lost in the system because they would be in the wrong courtroom, maybe the wrong courthouse. They didn't know where they were going. We created a 19th JDC family support center that operates once a week right across from the courthouse. And our families are never going to be alone. And then we also saw over and over and over again, people being routed into programming that was often under-resourced, ill-resourced. And so one of the things we have worked with is our recovery court. One of the pictures you see is our deputy chief of the criminal court who runs our recovery court. We literally brought in our housing partners so that they could have valid referrals, because people sometimes sit in jail because the court system says that you don't have anywhere to go, so we're not going to let you go. Why would I let you out? I have no way to know if you're going to appear for court. So those are very tangible fruits that came out of our court watch. And I want to leave everybody with just this one comment, because court watch has changed my life. I have people who are judges in my family. I have people who are law enforcement in my family, and I have people who have been through the system in my family. But what I have learned as a court watcher, and especially in partnership with National Court Watch, anybody who tells you the system cannot change, will not change, has never been a court watcher. Sometimes even the simplest response of saying, this is what's happening, going before our Metro Council, which is our city council for many people, and saying 1/3 to 1/2 of what's on that docket every single day is domestic violence. How you gonna police your way out of that? Being able to challenge budgets because you are sitting there in real time and you have data. Being able to advocate with accountability and transparency for all the different ways. We have a user pay system in Louisiana, which is a very challenging thing. I don't think any other state in the country has it. And that means that the courts, in order to run, they have to create people in this system, even if everybody didn't break any rules. So one of the things we want everybody to know is that whether you live in a big town, whether you live in a small town, if you have courts, you are justice impacted. Join National Court Watch. If I see we at least have one person from Baton Rouge, and I am super excited, you can come and see me at 1 o'clock Monday through Friday, or you can come to the Family Support Center on Tuesday, or you can contact us directly through our Facebook page or our website. But come be a part of making our community safe, because Court Watch is an integral part of safety. And so we are in, if you're asking about National Court Watch, those are virtual meetings. If you are asking specifically about each of our programs, depending on where you are, that information will be put in the chat. And so again, I just want to thank everybody who has come here, and please know we are a living witness that Court Watch changes things, and it changes things every day.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. And you know, as someone who has participated in Court Watch in Pittsburgh, I definitely can relate to, you know, feeling the energy shift when you do walk in the courtroom, and the judges and the clerks and prosecutor know that there are court watchers present. So thank you. Next, we are going to head to Pittsburgh, and we are going to talk a little bit about the Western Pennsylvania Participatory Defense Hub. So Walter Harris, if you wouldn't mind coming off of mute and introducing yourself. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Walter Harris. I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I volunteer for the Western Pennsylvania Participatory Defense Hub in partnership also with ALC for Court Watch. First, I want to thank everybody for coming on, and I want to thank all the different court watchers across the country for the work that you do and the impact that you're having. And I want to encourage everybody that's thinking about becoming a court watch to definitely become it. I'm also a returning citizen, so I know firsthand about the fear of being in a system where others have control over your life and having to go through that alone. I've been convicted twice in state court in 1992, and then again in 1997, and then once in federal court in 2010. I've been home since February of 2021. I got introduced to participatory defense in June of 2021. Again, I got out of federal prison after serving 130 months in February, and in March, my nephew, who was 18 at the time, just graduated from high school, had got caught up in a legal situation in Blair County, which is Altoona, Pennsylvania. It's about 2 hours outside of Pittsburgh. It's a very harsh county to minorities, and especially towards people who's not living in that area. And so I was looking and trying to support my sister and his father, and I was at a meeting with an activist, and I had took a notebook because they didn't have money. They gave him a $250,000 bail, straight cash, and this kid was innocent. I knew he didn't know anything about what was going on, and he was in shock. He didn't know what was going on, and the family didn't know how to help him. So talking to a friend and taking notes and writing down some lawyers and stuff, she mentioned participatory defense. I didn't know what it meant or anything. I just wrote it down. A couple weeks later, his father was talking about the notes, and he was like, "Remember that name she mentioned?" And I was like, I know what you're talking about, but I'm not sure. So I went back in the notes and I looked and I Googled it, and a participatory defense website came up. So let me tell you a little bit about participatory defense. It's a community programming model for people facing charges, their families and communities, to impact the outcomes of cases and transform the landscape of power in the court system. It's a national movement and initiative. So at the time I looked on their website, Pittsburgh didn't have a participatory defense hub. There was one in Erie. So I contacted some people from the Philly hub that put me in contact with one of the Philly hubs. Philly have a lot of hubs. Put me in contact with someone from the Erie hub. They were meeting once a week on Zoom because of COVID. I started attending their meeting. They started empowering me to help my nephew and to empower his parents. After you keep volunteering, it's like training. They start training you on things. One of the elements of participatory defense is court packing. I didn't know the difference that court packing make. I seen it firsthand. In my nephew's case, again, it's about 2 hours outside of Pittsburgh. So every time we had to go to court for him, it was a long ride. But just being in the courts and having people there to represent you makes such a difference. One day we were in a hearing in Blair County, and they kept my nephew like last for some reason. The courts will do things just to irritate you and to keep families, to try to prevent them, make it hard to keep them coming back to support their loved ones. But this time we had a lot of people, a lot of the family took off from work, planned it. From my training that I was receiving, I told them how important just packing the courts was. So evidently all the people of color that was in the courtroom that day, towards the end of the day, was there for him. But we had some people that drove to Blair County that wasn't that was of the ethnicity of the people in the court, the people. So it was shocking when they asked everybody who's here for my nephew's name, and everybody that was left in the courtroom stood up, and I could see the impact on everybody's face. The tip staff, the judge, the DAs, even my nephew's lawyers. Like, who is all these people that showed up to support this kid? So I stayed on with participatory defense from the summer of 2021. And because it was Erie, I was asking about a hub for Pittsburgh. That's when I was introduced to Autumn Red Cross from Abolition Law Center. We started talks about starting our own participatory defense hub. And we kept talking until we formulated it, and we had the people. And so we started Pittsburgh Participatory Defense Hub, which later merged with Erie to become Western Pennsylvania Participatory Defense Hub. Autumn invited me to Court Watch, which I seen as court packing to another level. Court Watch allows us to go into the courtroom and to sit there and to collect data and to write reports and to create action steps to address the injustices that the court watchers witness themselves. There are several things that we accomplished in the time I've been court watching, but I'm gonna leave that to Autumn to explain. But one of the things that I seen, or one of the statements at the beginning of this, there was a statement that said that injustice happens in empty courtrooms. That statement couldn't be truer. When the courts don't think that there's anyone watching, or when they don't think that an individual has support, they're liable to do anything. Just recently, I was helping one of the guys that we help. He don't have much family in this area to help, but he has an uncle that comes down from Philadelphia for his court hearings. And when his uncle's not available, I make sure that I show up, or somebody from participatory defense show up. So since we've been helping him, his case was, I'm not going to discuss the elements of his case, but it was a case that, from my experience, my personal experience in the courtroom, and even my experience as a court watcher and my training from PAR-DEF, I didn't think that there was no way that they would be offering him like jail time, especially with the year and a half that he had already been in jail. But at a court hearing, and his uncle had showed up at this court hearing, and we went to talk to his public defender, and they were talking about 5 years. And that just blew my mind. I thought that was like ridiculous. And I talked to his attorney, and I was like, yeah, well, do you understand? And I gave him some elements of the situation, and it made him reconsider, even to the point that the DA wasn't even trying to pursue jail time. But had me and his uncle not been there, and had he went through that alone, he would have been taking a plea for 5 years when the DA wasn't even seeking any time outside of the time he already served in jail. So again, that statement that injustices happen in empty courtrooms is so true. And as court watchers and participatory defense hubs, our impact is beyond what you can imagine just being in the courtroom. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Dr. Autumn Red Cross, and I'm open to any questions later on.
Thank you so much, Walter. It's great working with you. I really appreciate you. And the reason that we wanted to talk about participatory defense is because these two groups sort of work hand in hand. And participatory defense allows us to do more of the advocacy work. Like Walter said, we found from the court watching side that we can move in 3 different ways. We can move as a court watch, where we're simply recording, observing and recording what we're seeing in the court. We can move as court support, and that's when people are specifically asking you to come to court to support them. So it's in response to an ask, and observation, collection, formally is not necessary. What we want to do is just put our bodies in the space and be among one another in community. And that's sort of the same with court packing. Court packing has to do with bigger issues when there's a call out to, hey, can you just come to court today? We're going to court for these specific reasons. Sometimes it's issue-based and therefore very political. Sometimes it's specific to the person who is having to be represented in court. And I love doing this day, an orientation or an information session about court watching. We originally started this about 3 years ago at the suggestion of Erica Brusselers, who I'm very proud of. She's now the treasurer for Allegheny County. She was once the volunteer coordinator for ALC. And we thought it would be a great time to talk about Court Watch, because I see Court Watch as a form of protest in and of itself, and like was popular in the days of the modern civil rights movement, where people put themselves in spaces that they weren't welcome in, just as a form of a protest, just to interrupt the status quo. That's what we do when we court watch. We're putting our bodies into these spaces that aren't welcoming to us, not necessarily expecting us, whereas normally the people who are going to court are involved somehow. They're subpoenaed, they're witnesses, they're family members, and they're going on behalf of or because they're called themselves, or they're players in the court. We are just members of the community who are going in love and support, and with a passion to make change for the betterment of our society. And yes, like Walter said, like Dr. Carmen says, injustice happens in empty courtrooms. So we're trying to change all of that. Next slide, please. This past year in 2023, we published 3 reports as a result of our work in Court Watch. We published a report called Invisible by Design, which is looking at cognitive and cognitive disabilities, which are said to be invisible, but we're saying that that's just because it's a thing that we don't want to see. And the report helps us to determine how we need to change the way we operate in and among people so that we could all be more whole. We published a report called You Send Yourselves to Jail, which is based on the specialty court, the mental health court specifically, which is a diversionary program, but you are made to plea in order to be a part of this program. So the report drills down on that. And we also published a report on probation in Allegheny County. And we see that probation is the driving lead for incarceration at the jails. And during our talks today, you heard a lot about the jails. And that is simply because everyone who is in jail has to come through the courts. So we're obligated to take a look at the way people are coming through court, what court is doing and saying about our people, so that we can have more of a role of how people are handled. It's not just others, it's us, right? We are the community and we're concerned, and we do this work in love. Is there a next slide?
Next slide is just some good contact information, which I see you've been putting in the chat, and we can send that out to all the attendees later as well.
We can definitely send that out to all the attendees. And what our intention was at this point is we wanted to open the floor or invite onto the floor a younger court watch of ours to talk about what they're doing in their state, how to get involved with them, and what their findings have been. So, Fran?
Mute. Fran, you're muted.
I'm so thrilled to have a chance to be here and it's amazing to hear these stories of people so far ahead of where we are. It's inspiring, and I just can't tell you enough how great a job you're all doing and how impressive it is. We just started a year ago. We're part of a statewide organization called Wisdom that does prison reform efforts, but they have just expressed an interest in starting a court watch in Milwaukee, the place that needs it most. And we're in Outagamie County, which is a small northeastern Wisconsin county with a lot of justice problems, even though our population of people that need help is much smaller here than it is in Milwaukee. So we've only been going for since last June, so about 6 months. We have 3 months of initial appearance observations, and we collected data from that and made observations. I'm going to ask Mary Beckley, who's my co-chair, to talk about that.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Yes, I want to just get into it really fast here since we're kind of like limited on time. We actually appeared at 76 different initial appearances, which are bail hearings. I mean, that's bond hearings. And as for getting a listing of who is going to be in court that day, it's released at 6:30 in the morning, but we have tried to get that list and have them send it to us directly, but they're not very accommodating about doing that for us. We basically broke it down, our stats down into gender and then race. And from there went to basically who received cash bonds, who received new signature bonds, and who was public defender eligible. And our findings were kind of interesting because we found that there were 32 out of the 76 people who were eligible for cash bonds. And even as misdemeanor charges, there was a cash bond. 13 people were given a cash bond for misdemeanor charges. And even in 2 cases, there were homeless people who were given cash bonds of $25 and $50. The judge, knowing these people had no money whatsoever and no way or means of ever getting any money to help their cause. So that's pretty much what our demographics pointed out. And I'm going to pass it back to Franny, who's going to go into a little bit of how this all more further, how we noticed when we were going to these different initial hearings.
So thanks, Mary. I think everyone who talked today has had probably very similar experiences in these hearings, but has been able to maybe come out with a lot more information. I was amazed by what was it, 6,700 hearings that Carmen went to? So we have a way to go. All of our hearings are by Zoom, even though COVID is no longer has anything to do with it. It's just more convenient, even though the jail is in the same building as the courthouse. It's easier not to bring them downstairs. There were lots of signs of mental distress, probably addiction effects, and other kinds of bizarre behavior during the hearings that were not mentioned or addressed. So we also could see that the judge often, most of the time, agreed with the DA and set a cash bail regardless of what the public defender asked for or the reasons the public defender gave. So we've got these observations, we have our data, we have 3 people actively observing, and we have 2 more that are interested in taking training. So I'm really hoping that we can find more court watchers to help us do a better job. And I'm hoping that all of you here will have some suggestions for us or questions that will help us identify where we go from here.
Yeah. We have this information now, and where can we take this information? Who can we report it to? We also, should we expand our observations beyond bail hearings? I've noticed most of you still stick with your bail hearings. We have seen 2 judges in our county who are very questionable in what they do. So we would truly like to sit in on their court proceedings, because we feel, as you have done, pack the court, I think makes a big difference, and it allows them not to be, to do the things that they are doing. We do have help from the Wisconsin Watch program, which puts out presentations, and we have a great reporter here in Outagamie County with our local paper, who is not afraid to put out nice reports on some of these proceedings that have been taking place. So that has given us a great help. We, as Franny said, we need to recruit more people, and education. I mean, even I was a probation parole officer, and I'm still educating myself on what's going on, you know, as far as the court system. And there's a lot I need to know, and your court watch trainings have really given me a lot of background information. And Rev, I want to talk to you, because I want to find out where you get the money to do what you're doing. So that's the end of our presentation, unless Franny has more she wants to add. You're muted, Franny.
Learn how to use Zoom. I have, this is our Court Watch t-shirt, which has our local organization, Esther, on the back and our logo, but this will face the judge and the people so that the person who's accused and the other players will all know that someone is there observing. So thank you for the time and the invitation.
I love that. And that's a question for individual court watchers, I find. Whether or not to sort of announce themselves, right? Like, so we have toyed with the idea of whether or not we wanted to have t-shirts when we go in, or did we want to go in a little bit less obvious? And that's a question that court watchers usually have to toy with. But I thought that maybe Reverend Anderson wanted to respond to your questions. And then I know that the Zoom user has had their hand up for some time.
And I absolutely did. I love what you all are doing. I was going to say, and I did put a little bit of this in the chat, you'd be amazed at how much you can do just with your information in real time. And what I mean by that is we don't pay for any media here. One of the things that we have been very, very good at, so for instance, when we started the Family Support Center, we sent out press releases, we did all of that. We know who the journalists are that cover the court. Our information is the news. And because we are there, we miss very few sessions. And I want to answer the question about, and everybody has to decide what they want to do about where they want to watch. But the reason we are going to stick with first appearance is because the damage almost happens at that stage. That 40% of our arrests are actually not billed, but people can't get their names back once that damage is done. And so we find that that is just a crucial point where we can make systemic change. And so that's why we do it. But I did want to stress that one of the benefits we have, for instance, this morning, and I put in the chat the flyer we did for this weekend. We did events that magnified our program. We have a very, very vibrant and wonderful library system, and we partner with them. So our Family Support Center is based out of that. We host a lot of our meetings with the library. We educate. We have 2 universities here that both have law schools. And so we often volunteer to provide information. This year we were in one of our high schools because unfortunately, if you're an African-American boy, you need to learn something about the courts because the courts and the police are looking for you. You are the raw material for which they are processing. And so we've been very fortunate, if I can just say that, in utilizing the fact that we can release information in a day if we need to. So for instance, I had put in the chat, we are one of the only, well, we're the only parish now that has a 287G agreement, which allows ICE to pick people up. Well, we have a partnership with one of our major refugee and immigrant organizations so that that information comes out in very real time. So we put a lot of information out in sort of at the time, as opposed to waiting for a report. And then, of course, we have our own meeting that happens every single month. And often our topics are drawn from what we're seeing in court. So I will say that one of the things about a court watch that makes noise and makes waves is that people who are just as impacted often will find their way to you. And that isn't just the people we think. Like I will tell you, I started in traffic. Most people don't start in traffic, and traffic is the biggest driver here of all. And because we got publicity for the work we did in traffic, we got people that might not have normally been interested in doing a court watch because they didn't see themselves being engaged with a criminal situation. But everybody thinks traffic is a racket. So that did help us.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. I realize it's 2 o'clock. I did want to get to the Zoom users question, but with I do also respect your time and realize that we've come to a swift close. I did put into the chat a general, it's a sign up form for ALC Court Watch, but we will take any names that we have, and depending on where you are, we'll put you into contact with the closest court watch that we know of in your area. ALC does operate across the state. We have had court watching initiatives in Philadelphia as well. So that's to answer the one question that came up in the chat. So thank you so much for coming on today. Please don't feel that you're missing anything. I really appreciate your attention. I do want to get to the last question if the question still remains, and that would be from the Zoom user. So if none exists, that would be the end of our session today. Thanks again for coming on. Please sign up if you're interested in working with us or you're interested in knowing more so that you can start your own. This has been great for me. And we're doing this calling on the name of our ancestor, Dr. Martin Luther King, and the many others who fought for civil rights during the modern civil rights movement and the civil rights movements that have happened since and have happened previously. We're working towards liberation, life and satisfaction. And thanks so much for coming on.